There are many definitions of learning. A useful definition of learning is the acquisition of knowledge, skills, and attitudes through experience, practice, or study, or by being taught. In simple terms, learning is behavioral change. Knowledge, skills, and attitudes are linked. The behaviors we adopt, or the thought processes we use, are the result of our unique combination of all three. When we develop people, we're looking to achieve changes in knowledge, skills, and/or attitudes, and often all three. It's useful to clearly establish at the outset what we are trying to achieve through the learning. Do we want to simply give people knowledge? Do we want to give them new skills and perhaps an ability to use new knowledge? Or do we perhaps want to change their attitude? It's useful to clearly establish at the outset what we're trying to achieve through the learning. Do we want to simply give people knowledge, or do we want to give them new skills and perhaps an ability to use new knowledge? Or do we perhaps want to change their attitude? The figure on screen shows a typical learning cycle. The emotional journey through the learning process is well illustrated by the conscious competence ladder, a popular and intuitive approach that helps us manage our own emotions during a sometimes dispiriting learning process. More than this, it helps us to be more in touch with the emotions of the people we are developing, so we can better coach them through the learning process. According to this approach, we all start from the point of not knowing what we do not know or cannot know. We call this unconscious incompetence. Next, to learn new skills and to gain knowledge, we need to be conscious of what we do and do not know. Developing that awareness, that is, conscious incompetence, is the first step towards gaining knowledge. Now we know that we did not know. This discovery can be uncomfortable, as can be the experience of not being very good at what you are trying to do. It saps our confidence and belief in ourselves. In the next stage, as we learn and build expertise in a new area, we move from conscious incompetence towards conscious competence. At this stage, we can feel uncomfortable, a little self-conscious as we put our learning into practice. Sometimes this is where we give up, feeling that the learning is somehow beyond us. We just don't get it. However, as familiarity with the subject, skill, or behaviour develops, we usually find a tipping point, a point when we begin to make sense of it all, and our confidence and self-belief start to recover until we finally reach unconscious competence. Our new skills become habits, and we perform the task, skill, or behaviour without conscious effort and with automatic ease. This is the peak of our confidence and ability. It's important to remember that things are not always what they seem on the surface. The risk when launching into providing a learning solution without carrying out any form of needs analysis is that you don't solve the underlying problem. If your learning solution doesn't solve the underlying problems, learning can lose credibility. Organisations will be reluctant to spend money on learning and development activities if they can't see the benefits, and managers will be reluctant to provide the time for those activities. By ensuring the solutions you put in place are the right ones, you can help to justify the cost of learning, provide real measurable value to the organisation, and safeguard the role of learning within the organisation. In addition, if you have a clear understanding of the need and the problem you're trying to solve, you should be able to evaluate the success of the learning after the event. Many people involved in learning and development find evaluation of learning difficult. This is usually because they've failed to identify the problem they're trying to solve with the learning, or establish a clear goal for the learning beforehand. It can be tempting to provide a blanket approach to learning. A problem exists, so let's give everyone some training. For example, we've had too many customer complaints, so we'll provide everyone with some customer service training. Part of your needs analysis is finding out who needs training. What is the point in training 25 people if the problem is restricted to 1 or 2? The business looks to you to solve problems. and improve performance, and it expects you to do this in a cost-effective way, using appropriate solutions. There are different methods for identifying learning needs. These methods include observation, such as observing someone completing a task or process, job analysis, which is analysing a role by referring to a job description or role profile. Then there's task or process analysis, which is analysing a task or process, sometimes using flowcharts. We have group discussion, which is having a discussion with people involved in a task or process. Then we've got questionnaires, such as asking questions to assess knowledge or identify problem areas. We can conduct one-on-one interviews. We can talk to people involved in a role or process on a one-to-one basis. We can conduct appraisals, such as obtaining and analysing information about an employee's job performance. Finally, there's simulations, which is imitating a real task or process. Learning goals are a crucial tool in developing learning opportunities. Effective learning goals help learning and development professionals create strong learning programs and enable participants to learn more successfully. It's often useful to divide larger goals into more manageable sub-objectives that can be realised within weeks or months. An ideal learning goal includes an action verb. An action verb is just a measurable verb that describes what the learner will know or be able to do. Action verbs are both descriptive and specific. They can support the assessment of whether the learner has achieved the learning they intended. The English language is rich in action verbs, but very often learning goals are expressed in vague terms. For example, understand, learn, or appreciate. These are words that make it difficult to pin down what exactly it is to be learned. Then there's performance conditions. The relevant circumstances, situations, or context under which performance must occur. Performance conditions bring a learning goal into focus, providing more clarity. They describe any specific conditions, necessary circumstances, or context in which performance after learning is to take place. Performance conditions may refer to a place, such as in the workplace, specific groups of people, that is, colleagues, clients, or customers, quantities, for example, the 5 most frequent causes of faults, and material, or equipment and resources or media, for example, in writing or using a PC. Then there's performance criteria. Performance criteria are criteria for acceptable levels of performance, that is, the standard to be reached. Performance criteria relate to the required standard of performance after learning has taken place. A criterion may be as simple as basic, intermediate, or advanced, or it may be more quantitative or qualitative in some way. Providing opportunities to learn is key for organisational success, which explains the increasing emphasis on the importance of workplace learning. It saves time and money to have learning come to where people are, rather than them having to go to it. Working and learning go hand in hand as totally complementary activities. In fact, any activity, whether or not you call it working, generates experiences, and experiences are the staple diet of learning. With formal learning experiences tend to be organised and have a clear beginning, middle, and end. The training or learning department sets the goals, not the learners. Formal learning, for example, a course taken or undertaken in a real or virtual classroom, carries a clear learning label. Participants are in no doubt that a course is a contrived experience designed to achieve certain learning outcomes. Informal learning describes a lifelong process whereby individuals learn in a variety of places, such as at home, work, and through daily interactions and shared relationships among members of society. For many learners, this includes language acquisition, cultural norms, and manners. Informal learning, by contrast to formal learning, is less clearly labelled, less organised, and goes on all the time. The term informal learning is widely used to describe the many forms of learning that take place independently from instructor-led programs. Examples include books, self-study programs, mentoring, coaching, informal discussion, observation, self-reflection, and discovery. Experience indicates that much of the learning for performance is informal. Those who transfer their knowledge, skills, and attitudes to a learner are usually present in real time. Such learning can take place over the telephone or through the internet, as well as in person. A study of time to performance done by Sally Ann Moore at Digital Equipment Corporation in the early 1990s graphically shows this disparity between formal and informal learning. The majority of organisations that provide training currently involve only formal learning. The result is that they spend most of their money on the smallest part, i.e. 25%, of the learning equation. Many organisations seek to balance the professional development needs and aspirations of individuals with those of the organisation. An individual learning plan, sometimes called a professional development plan, is likely to be based on life and career goals, on the current work situation, on the organisation's goals, and on a strategy to achieve personal and organisational goals. The individual staff member, in consultation with their supervisor, will usually develop this plan. A team learning plan identifies the learning needs of the team as a whole and the strategies for achieving those needs. Group learning needs might include project management skills, teamwork, group decision making, or communication skills. The strategies for developing might reflect those needs, such as a supervised project where members of the group have the opportunity to practice specific skills and reflect on their performance. The benefits of a team learning plan are that it accommodates the organisation's requirements for team development, multi-skilling, and cross-organisation development. It also helps the team focus on workplace learning and other opportunities. It encourages the use of existing staff when considering learning opportunities, and it encourages staff to see themselves as part of a team rather than as working alone. Part of developing an effective workplace learning environment is to understand how adults learn best. Educating adults differs from educating children. One of the most important differences, compared to children, is that adults have accumulated knowledge and work experience that can add to the learning experience. What worries adult learners? Well, they can be afraid of participation, they may lose their dignity, they may sometimes resent authority, and they may worry about keeping pace with demands placed on them. It's worthwhile having adult learning principles in the back of your mind if you're developing a learning program. Adult learners must feel free to learn. They need to be in a safe environment to learn, and they need to have the authority over their own future to direct their own or set their own learning goals. You need to give them an opportunity to participate actively and to build on and use their own experience. You need to make sure that the learner can see their learning has been successful, and you need to also ensure that they experience effective two-way communication. Each person is unique and has a particular way of approaching learning and processing new knowledge, skills, and attitudes. The different ways in which individuals learn have fascinated people for centuries. As a result, a large number of learning theories have been published that all aim to provide measurable frameworks to explain how people learn. These frameworks are known as learning styles. A person's learning style is determined by the ways in which they use their senses to perceive information, the ways that their brains function to store and process information, and the ways that they organise and present information. When you understand how people learn, you're able to design and develop learning materials and delivery methods that are learner-centred. useful, accessible, and relevant. The following tips will help you create learning that sticks. Create lots of beginnings and endings in the learning process. Short sessions are more memorable than long ones. Make sure you build in a lot of time for review. Review what has been covered at the end of each session. Try to make the learning process innovative and different. We remember the unusual. Make the learning hands-on. Get learners involved as much as possible. Try to engage as many of the senses, sight, sound, touch, taste, and even smell as possible. Create learning that involves both sides of the brain. Create patterns with information. We remember information better this way. Patterns can include pictures and diagrams, rhymes, songs, or anything else that creates a pattern that can be easily replicated. And finally, link the learning to the workplace. Learning and development specialists may help you to ensure that employees increase job productivity and performance. A training or learning and development manager typically performs the following tasks. They design and coordinate staff learning programs based on organisational and employee learning needs. They analyse learning needs as they relate to the goals of the organisation and the work area. They obtain information on work-related external courses, prepare reports on their suitability, and make recommendations on staff attendance at training courses. They arrange training courses, and they evaluate the effectiveness of learning programs to plan future courses or to amend existing ones. They also provide career development sessions for existing staff and conduct induction sessions for new employees. L&D specialists also include instructional designers. Instructional designers specialise in the design and development of learning resources, which involves preparing learning and assessment materials from researched information or from their own knowledge. Then we've got workplace trainers. Workplace trainers conduct training specifically related to acquiring workplace competencies. The training may involve demonstrating or operating equipment, leading group discussions, or role-play activities. Workplace trainers can also be workplace assessors if they possess assessor qualifications. A workplace assessor assesses employees to determine their workplace competence in accordance with national training packages and/or industry standards and/or organisational standards. Workplace assessors can also be workplace trainers. We also have external learning and development consultants. An external learning and development consultant is able to provide expertise that is not found within the organisation or that needs additional resourcing. Most consultants specialise in a particular area, such as training delivery in specific topics, in instructional design or training systems management. If we were discussing this live, I would now be asking you to come up with 5 ways to improve learner engagement. However, all I can do is make some suggestions here. So your answers could have included that you select activities that are at a correct level of difficulty and that are motivating, that you actively involve learners in activities, i.e. getting them to write or solve a problem, that you contextualize the learning so that learners can apply the principles to daily situations, that you create learning plans to personalize the learning for each learner, that you create a good classroom management approach. So you start in time, you have some rules about how the session will operate, and you reward appropriate behaviour. Finally, you provide support to undo any prior barriers to learning.